Well, Oregon's done in the transfer portal, right? Wrong. They are still going after Jabbar Muhammad from Washington, and they should absolutely want him. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. So if you have not already, like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, Oregon, according to Max Torres, according to various rumors, according to people I've talked to, Jabbar Muhammad is still in the picture. This is the cornerback from Washington who held Troy Franklin under 40 receiving yards in the Pac-12 championship game. This is a guy Oregon should absolutely want. You may be thinking to yourself, especially if you're an everydayer out there, thank you for being that, by the way, if you are, you should be thinking to yourself, well, hasn't Oregon already added a lot of talent in the secondary? Yes. Yes, they absolutely have. But there are two reasons why Muhammad should still be in play for the Ducks. Number one, he is someone that is proven at the Power 5 level that he can go against the best receivers in college football. Case in point, what I alluded to a moment ago when he had the clamps on Troy Franklin. So this is a guy who was just playing in the national championship game with Washington. He was their best cover corner on defense. And J.J. McCarthy wasn't exactly the reason, along with those Michigan receivers, that the Wolverines put up 34 points in that game. That dude is a certified baller. Really, really good football player. And if you can add somebody like that, there is just no downside. Well, what if certain guys transfer? What if so-and-so goes out? Every year in college football is a year-to-year proposition. You have to look at every college football season as a one-off. That's where Oregon is at. Not every program in the country is in that space. Washington, for instance, is not in that space. They cannot, because of how much they've lost from their roster a season ago, go all in for 2024. Okay? But Oregon can, and they are. And Ohio State can, and they are. And Alabama's going to put together the best they can. Georgia can, and they are. When you have the opportunity, that's what you do. And that's what this move would be for Oregon if Jabbar Muhammad comes to Oregon. It is, we have guys who could start for the Ducks and the season go well. We have guys who could start elsewhere and have a good season. But we want to bring in someone who could be even better. And if the staff feels that Jabbar Muhammad would be better than the guys they currently have in that room, that is a move you absolutely make. Because why wouldn't you? If you have the ability to improve your team, and if the drawback that you're having in the back of your mind is, well, what about the future? What about guys who won't get playing time? What about this guy who came in? As an Oregon fan, here's what I want the staff to do. Here's what I want Lanning to do with every single move. What puts Oregon in the best position to compete for 2024? And adding Muhammad would be that guy, would be that sort of move, rather. That's the first reason. The second reason is that Demetrius Martin, the secondaries coach, DB's coach for Oregon, is now over at Michigan State. We'll see him at Autzen Stadium later this year when he and Jonathan Smith come to town for a conference game in the Big Ten, a conference game. I'm still getting used to that. And I don't think it's going to really hit home until that Michigan State game, because the first Big Ten game is UCLA on the road. The second Big Ten game is Michigan State at home. Last time Michigan State came to Autzen, Marcus Mariota made a heck of a play. Double-digit, or two-possession, second-half deficit comeback. Great game. Ifo Ekpreolamu, the diving interception. Okay, anyway, so now that we've gotten past that quick trip down memory lane, Demetrius Martin left to go be the defensive backs coach over in East Lansing. Does it seem out of the realm of possibility that one or two, or I don't even know how many guys who he recruited, who he has coached, who he has a relationship with, could go with him? This is speculative on my part. I have not heard, read, seen, been told, nothing of the sorts. that someone is considering entering the transfer portal. However, Oregon has got a lot of corners in the room. Oregon also is over the scholarship limit at the moment. There is going to be more attrition for this roster as time goes on. Now, that is going to come most likely in the spring transfer portal window because Oregon has to be down to 85 by, I believe, fall practice or fall camp, whatever you want to call it, is when they have to get down to 85. They're over that limit right now. So some guys are going to leave. Some guys are going to leave. And when a coach leaves, oftentimes he'll try to bring players with him. We usually think about that in the context of head coaches, right? When Jed Fish went up to Washington, what's the first thing everyone's thinking about? Well, are Tetairoa McMillan and Noah Fafita going with him? Who else could he bring from Arizona? They got some talented guys down there. Who could they bring up there? By the way, there's an all-conference corner that Arizona had this year who's got his name in the transfer portal, and he's got a no contact in his, I think, Twitter bio. Is he going up? So that sort of stuff happens all the time. It happens with position coaches as well. Think back to Oregon. When the staff was put together in 2022 and Dan Lanning got hired, Tony Tuioti came over from Nebraska to be the defensive line coach. Who did he bring with him? Casey Rogers and Jordan Riley. It's not unheard of. So I think that the maximizing the roster angle and also the potential departures angle, and we have no idea who that could be, are reasons why I say yes, absolutely go after Jabbar Muhammad. And this Oregon secondary has got so many bodies. And here's the third reason that I kind of thought of, but definitely thought of as I'm recording the show here. You never know when injuries are going to pop up. You just don't. I mean, look at what happened to Oregon secondary this past year. First go round against Washington. You remember what happened in that game? Kyrie Jackson got hurt in the first half, and Jaleel Florence got hurt in the second. I might have that reversed. But at one point in time, at several points in time, in that game, which was never, out of hand either way, it was always competitive. Got to have your best players available on the field. And at one point in time, several points in time, Oregon was down each of their top two corners. And if you can put together a secondary, the Big Ten doesn't have as many great passing offenses as what Oregon saw a season ago. Though Ohio State, they're going to be able to throw the football. They've got some talented players over there. But I think that for Oregon secondary, when you're going up against a great passing attack, which you're just inevitably going to run into in college football from time to time, if you can have four corners that you can say, yeah, any one of these guys would start on any roster across the conference or are capable of at least fighting for playing time on any roster across the conference, iron sharpens iron in practice. So you get the best out of those guys. But most importantly, if you have injuries, there's no drop off there. And I think this past season, Oregon had that problem a little bit, not a lot, but I think there was a little bit of an issue there. When Jaleel Florence got hurt, Dante Manning stepped in. I think Jaleel Florence is a better player than Dante Manning. What would Oregon's defense look like if when Florence got hurt, a guy stepped in that was just as good and was that close to beating him out for the starting corner position anyway? So those are the three reasons why I look at Jabbar Muhammad and say, yeah, Oregon should go get him. Transfers and recruits and everything that has happened to this point, there's one central goal, and that is be the best team you could possibly be. And I think that the cornerback competition would be fierce in the best way possible. There's been a crystal ball logged for him over, I think, by somebody at On3. I've heard that that Oregon's in a good position to get him. The visit is reportedly happening this weekend. We'll see if that's going to be the lead segment on my Monday show. But if Jabbar Muhammad can be obtained, Oregon should absolutely go out there and get him. The Ducks are going to the Big Ten, and they are ready for the Big Ten in more ways than one. Are you ready to check out FanDuel, though? Are you prepared? Have you done it already? If so, 2 thumbs up. If you haven't, good news. The NFL regular season has already wrapped up, but the playoffs are in full swing. Conference championship games are this weekend, and there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, whether you win or lose. It can be on anything. It can be on the NFL. They've got NBA. They've got college football. They've got everything you want over there. And there are a bunch of different ways to bet. You can do live same game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. You can do all of that and more. Just go check them out at FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Go check them out. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, let's hit some mailbag questions here. And I love me some mailbag questions. If you want to be a part of it, by all means. This show is 5 days a week, all year round. I'll always get to your questions. YouTube comments, Twitter, I almost double-crossed myself there. At S McLaughlin CFB or at Locked On Ducks, DMs and mentions wide open. Those be the handles. If you want priority access, you can go over to SUBTEXT as well. Free 14-day trial. Then it's just $5 a month, but not a requirement. Just if you want that next level and you want to join the flock over there here at Locked On Ducks. First, though, before we get there, a question from Cruise Coward 5093, and then we'll be parlaying. It'll all tie together. Don't worry. Can you answer this? A lot of people think Oregon will need time to adjust to the quote-unquote physicality and tough schedule of the Big Ten. Am I wrong to think that the Big Ten hype is overrated and that it might actually be easier for the Ducks since all the teams play the same boring type of football on offense? A lot of these Big Ten homers think their conference is full of Utahs and Bamas. Not often Utah and Bama get put in the same sentence, when really, aside from the top, there are a bunch of Vanderbilts. The Big Ten wasn't impressive. Okay, amazing question here, my guy. Cruz, that is from the top shelf right there. What did Vanderbilt do to you? Every conference needs a Vanderbilt. The Big Ten does have its Vanderbilts, by the way, but this question is a really, really good one. Oregon and Dan Lanning are more than prepared to go into the Big Ten. So the narrative around the Big Ten is one that is reflected by the data. And the data say that there's not as much great offense and there's more great defense. And the not as great offense is more driven by the great defense. However, there are Iowas out there that just, boy, it's a struggle to watch them try and score points. It's really, really brutal. Another reason the scoring is not as high in the Big Ten and why toughness and physicality are so valued. Think about Michigan, for instance, that just won the national championship, and I'll get to Ohio State in just a moment, is that they play in the middle of the country. And come October, November, December, you play in a lot of cold weather places. I guess the regular season's only in November. But when you're playing a home game in Minnesota in November, guess what? It's not warm. You think Illinois, which has got a couple of Big Ten schools in there, you think that's a state that is known for its summer-like temperatures come October, November? It's not. It definitely is not. And it's harder to play offense in those environments. The reason I feel Oregon is prepared to go into the Big Ten and play with teams that have a little bit of a different style and can't just throw it around all the time because they're not in warm weather all season long, is that this is a multiple and balanced team on both sides of the ball. Let's start with the offense. When you think about this Oregon offense over the last couple of years, what's the first thing you think of? Probably Bo Nix. Okay, that's a perfectly great place to start. Let's assume that's where my mind went as well when that's how you answered the question. Not how I answered the question. That was your answer, but it's a great answer. Bo Nix came over from Auburn in the SEC, where he had a horrible offensive line, no running game, and not a great staff. He went to Oregon, where he then had an elite offensive line twice, a great running game twice, great support and great receivers and great coaching. And he thrived. What's one of those elements that's in there? A running game. A running game. And Oregon's offensive line this year was one of the, I think, 12-8, one of those finalists as the list got whittled down for the Joe Moore Award, given to the best offensive line in college football. All of those guys are returning except for two, and one of those guys actually transferred from the Big Ten, Matthew Bedford, the Indiana transfer. That guy's going to slide in for Stephen Jones and be a sixth-year starter in his own right. So Oregon up front in the trenches is where they are built on offense, because Bo Nix was able to thrive thanks to the offensive line that gave him a running game and gave him time to throw the football. That has been a priority for Dan Lanning and this staff. And it's going to continue to be a priority. And on the defensive side of the ball, you got teams like Minnesota, for instance, or Penn State, or Michigan that want to run the Wisconsin, for instance, wants to run the football. All of these teams historically are big on running the ball. Well, what do you need to match up with those guys? You got to be good up front. Where does Dan Lanning's recruiting focus come around to be every single year? The defensive line. It's the defensive line. That is a big time priority all the time. So, for Oregon, their style can translate to whatever they want to do. And offensively, they have given themselves the best weapons they can find and a capable veteran quarterback who's got a good arm. I won't say a great arm, but a good arm, and can execute an offense that is not reliant on just pushing the ball down the field. It's one that can do that, needs to do that, but also is very RPO based. They can run the ball. They can kill the clock. They can have time-chewing drive. Think about the Oregon State opening touchdown drive. 9 minutes down the field. Chipping away, little at a time. Solid defense. Cold temperatures. We might see more drives like that from Oregon in 2024 when they play a Big Ten schedule. When you have more of those sorts of games. We might see it. It is entirely possible. But as the Ducks go against teams that play that sort of style, the inverse is also true. Right? Because when teams come out west, if it is nice weather and it's a team that doesn't typically score a lot of points, well, that team now has to try and keep up with Oregon's offense. You may have a good defense, but guess what? Good offense beats good defense most of the time, especially when at home. So, not always, but most of the time. Because if you throw a back shoulder, guess what? There's nothing you can actually do to stop it. And I think Oregon's offense that has one of the longest streaks in the country, because they did so in every game this year of scoring 30 or more points. Yeah, you could see a game or two, maybe later in the year, when you look at Oregon's schedule, depending on where, everything falls for all of that. You might see a couple games in which Oregon doesn't score as many points. But I fully expect Oregon to be prepared to play whatever style they need. I think they could win a shootout. I think they could win a slugfest. I think they could win with their offense driving the ship. I think they could win with their defense at the helm. They could win with that it factor sometimes, like the 2020 Rose Bowl, where you get a drop punt and return it to the house for a touchdown. Whatever. I think this is a really, really complete Oregon team that can play in any environment, can play in any climate. I think the Ducks are going to be just fine going into the Big Ten. I think Lanning knows what he's doing. And Oregon, along with Ohio State, those are going to be the two favorites in the Big Ten next year. The next tier of teams will be the Penn States and the USCs. I honestly don't know who else. I mean, I haven't done a deep dive yet. Maybe I should. Maybe I should at some point. If you want me to here on the show, I'm of course happy to. But if you're asking me favorites in the Big Ten, I'd probably have of Ohio State, Oregon, 1A, 1B. I'd have Penn State there, number 3. I'd have USC at number 4. They've made the right defensive moves this offseason, and they've got a good quarterback, and Lincoln Riley knows how to score points. I mean, those are your teams. Those are your teams that are going to be contenders. Real quick, this question came in from Bud. When I think of college football, I think of games on Saturdays. Good, makes you a real fan. With next year's 12-team college football playoffs, the first round of games will be played on Friday and Saturday, the second round on Tuesday and Wednesday, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, and the championship game on Monday night. Your blood pressure and thoughts. Well, if Oregon's in it, my blood pressure will be a lot higher. My thoughts on the schedule for it? Put the championship game on a damn Saturday. It's not hard. This sport needs a commissioner so badly. So very, very badly. And the fact that we don't have one is rather infuriating. In many ways. Scheduling, when games are played. I don't care. Don't put the championship game on a Monday. It's utterly ridiculous. It is completely and utterly ridiculous. You know what's not ridiculous? That we've got more mailbag questions to get to. Another question that came in from Bud via SUBTEXT, priority access over there, as always. But that question from Cruz had been waiting for a little while. But Bud asks, with reports that Jim Harbaugh is having second interviews with at least 2 NFL teams, Chargers, it looks likely he will not be back at Michigan next year. What are the chances they will promote Sharon Moore, their offensive coordinator, rather than going outside and starting another onslaught of coaching changes? And do you anticipate more Michigan players going into the portal that might be a good fit for the Ducks? Another question was brought up as well. This from Zome7881. It is increasingly likely Harbaugh is going to the NFL, and there are rumors of Minter, their defensive coordinator, leaving with him. If he goes, what Michigan player should Oregon try to get from the portal? I don't think there are that many players left over at Michigan that Oregon would be after in the portal. But I don't think you can forecast who's going to leave, because back to Bud's question, I think the probability that Jim Harbaugh goes to the NFL and then Sharon Moore gets hired to be the head coach is about 90%. Harbaugh has every reason in the world to leave Michigan right now. There's a good job available. His roster's going to have a lot of turnover. He just won a national championship, and he was at Michigan for about a decade. No one can say he used them as a stepping stone. No one can say he wasn't all in. No one can say he didn't win the big one. There's nothing left. The NCAA's beaten down on his neck too. That's a cherry on top as to why I think he goes to the NFL. And by the way, for Duck fans, I know we support our pro Ducks very hard. I know that I certainly do. Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers, please and thank you. Please and thank you. Give Justin Herbert an actual coach. The 2 head coaches he's had in Los Angeles have been a position coach, Anthony Lynn, and Brandon Staley, who I don't know if he gets another job in the NFL, because that whole thing was a disaster for the last couple of years. It's a defensive coach that didn't know anything about defense, apparently, because they weren't any good despite having great players. So that would be great. I would love for Harbaugh to be the next head coach of the LA Chargers. Sharon Moore would be the logical hire. There are some players that Michigan would want to keep around, and Sharon Moore would be the best candidate to do that. But there aren't a litany of them. So because they have a lot of guys going to the NFL draft, like J.J. McCarthy, offensive lineman, Blake Corum, a couple guys from the defense, I think, as well, it was a really loaded team. It was a really good, well-developed, well-coached team. And I think that for the Wolverines, Sharon Moore has to be an attractive candidate because he is someone who's coached in big games. He beat Penn State on the road this season by calling 27 straight runs in the second half. But guess what? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think that I'm going to laugh at myself here momentarily because I just noticed something. I wonder if someone has to have noticed by now. Okay, I'll get back to that in a moment. Sharon Moore would make a lot of sense. When you've proven you can be a head coach in a big game and you can go out and beat a good team, there are a lot of intriguing elements there. I don't know what targets would be left for Michigan if they were going to go with an outside hire. I mean, I don't know, Urban Meyer? I don't know. I just don't know who exactly they would be looking at or who they'd be able to get. And so, we'll save the time for, should Oregon go and try and, find a player or two for Michigan from the portal if Harbaugh leaves and who actually ends up going there. But I think that for the Ducks, Harbaugh leaving would be great on 2 fronts. Number one, Harbaugh is a great coach, and I think Sharon Moore could do well, but is he Jim Harbaugh? No. Nobody is. Harbaugh is really good, and I would rather Michigan be weaker than Michigan be stronger because I want Oregon to be stronger in the Big Ten. And it's not as if there are a lack of good teams and brands and everything to the point where it's like, oh man, the Big Ten needs Michigan so badly. No, they got a lot of really good teams. You got Oregon coming in. You got Ohio State there. You got Penn State, who's always good. I think USC is going to be good next year. I just look at what is best for Oregon in that situation, and it's being able to go to Ann Arbor and get a win. Because although the 12-team playoff is devaluing the regular season, there is still a high level of urgency on it compared to the NFL. It's just lower than it was before, and I lament that severely. And Oregon can't afford more than 2 losses. And one of the games you would look at their schedule and circle as, well, that could be a loss, going to Ann Arbor, going to the Big House. Tough place to play, really good team. I'd rather Jim Harbaugh not be there than he be there, and I'd rather he be coaching Justin Herbert. So I think that would be a couple of good moves there for the Ducks if that were to happen. And Sharon Moore, I don't know how he wouldn't be the logical candidate, really, because he coached those games before and won them as well. He won all the games when Jim Harbaugh wasn't there. So he's capable of being a head coach, at least on game day. So before I get to Nate Bittle to wrap up today's show, I just realized, I don't know how I didn't realize it. I guess it's because I sit here and do the show and I'm looking at the camera, but I didn't put up the backdrop stuff for today. Someone has to have noticed by now. I mean, you guys are very attentive to detail out there, guys and girls that watch the show as well. I just don't know how I forgot. This is the first time I've ever forgotten and not noticed. I don't know why. I recorded Locked On College Football earlier tonight, and then I think I was just moving around the house a little bit, and I came to sit down and do the show, and I just forgot. Happens. It happens. Won't happen again tomorrow, but I bet you there are at least 2 comments that I will see tomorrow when this show airs, where people will say, "Whoa, wait a minute, where's your setup? Where's the duck flag? Where's the stuff?" I'm telling you, I just blanked, and I didn't realize until 24 minutes into the show. Because like I said, I'm not looking at the background as I record. I look at the camera. And then all of a sudden, I just noticed it out of the corner of my eye. Okay, that was really funny. You maybe didn't think so, but we're going to end with some good news today. And Oregon could use some good news on the men's basketball front, because this is a big week. I mean, just a massive, massive week for Oregon's tournament hopes. They are not a lock to make the tournament. This is not, just play 500 ball. Nope, Oregon's got 13 games left. They need to win at least 9 of them, maybe 10. They're capable of doing that, but that starts this week. Arizona State on Thursday, Arizona on Saturday. These are big games for the Ducks. If you're in Eugene listening to or watching the show, go to the game. They need your support. You got to win those games. You've got to win at least 1 game this week. You cannot drop 4 in a row, but certainly if you win 2, Oregon goes back inside the field of 68. I'd imagine they are out of it. I don't think Lenardi has released an updated bracketology. He did on the 23rd, and Oregon right now is sitting as the last team in, according to Joe Lenardi. That's not a comforting place to be. Oregon, once again, for the 3rd straight year, is on bubble watch, and they need to bolster their resume. So Nate Bittle is expected to come back this Thursday against Arizona State. That is fantastic news, because Oregon has had an issue with size and defense this year, and Bittle is a guy who brings it on offense. He can bring it defensively as well. Overall stud. This, of course, because, this comes on the heels of Oregon announcing that Mookie Cook re-aggravated his foot injury. The guy worked all in the early part of the season after getting injured in the offseason to come back, 5-star freshman from the state of Oregon. Super highly touted recruit. Oregon doesn't have that many actual wings. They have a lot of guards and guys like Cario Oquendo that, are 6'4" and can play on the wing, but they're really more like guards, but they play that in-between role. Mookie Cook has re-aggravated his foot injury, and that stinks. But Nate Bittle coming back, I'm excited to see what this Oregon team can do. I've been high on them all year, but they've got to figure it out defensively. That game against Utah was just terrible. It was a horrible defensive effort. They lost the game 80-77. You should never. I talked to our men's basketball coach at Southern Utah, Rob Jeter, who's an awesome guy, all the time. And one thing that I've picked up from him in my conversations, because they've struggled with defense at times this year as well, is when you score in the mid to upper 70s, that should always be enough, unless you're in overtime, to win you the game. I don't care if you're at home or on the road, and Oregon gave up too many easy buckets and lost the game by 3, and that was a bummer. But Arizona State, that's got to be a win. Just got to be a win. And then Arizona, I think, could move the Ducks off the bubble and back inside the field of 68. Big couple of weeks for the Ducks. But Nate Bittle coming back, Mookie Cook expected to be out. Oh, man, I don't know why they can't stay healthy. I don't know what's in the water in Eugene. But Nate Bittle coming back, there was a point in time where it looked like he could miss the entire season. Hopefully he comes back and is able to make an impact. And Folly Dante is continuing to get healthy. I just want this Oregon team to get into the tournament. And once you get there, they can do some stuff. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.